Hunt Showdown is adding AI hunter bots confirmed. Well, kind of. Recently, PC Gamer hosted a roundtable at the Game Developer Conference in San Diego with some industry insiders, including Crytek General Manager David Fifield. The hour-and-a-half conversation was really insightful into the minds of these developers, but also gave us a glimpse at some of the guiding principles and ideas going into Hunt Showdown's design and development. And they talk about a range of topics from game balance to seasonal wipes to weapon design, and we'll get into all of that, mostly focusing on a hunt perspective. But first, a little disclaimer for this video. If you'll do me a favor, give the article in the pinned comment a visit and listen to the full talk, because obviously I can't put all the context in this short video. And if you want more coverage of Hunt Showdown stuff, you should subscribe to this channel. And to kick this off, one of the things I see a lot of people say about modern Hunt Showdown is that it's becoming too casual and will soon just be Call of Duty in the Bayou. But one of the interesting things that is present throughout the interview is that Fifield and even the other developers acknowledge that Hunt is meant to be a hardcore game.
Often Hunt is a brutal experience, and we say for your first 100 hours, and there's a lot of us play over 1,000. I fell in love with it a couple of years ago, but it was like hitting that state of I'm a Hunt player was probably 400 or 500 hours. Mm-hmm. And when you start talking to people about I gave it a try or this, it's like, we ask how many 100 hours do you have, and if you only had 40, then we know you left the game and you just didn't probably like it.
And that's important to understand because it's a precursor and a backdrop to some of the other topics we're going to talk about in this video, including, yes, adding AI bots or introducing new forms of player onboarding. A lot of the difficulty in Hunt is related to its balance, and thankfully, that was a large section of this talk. How new FPS titles often have an asymmetric approach to gameplay, and what these titles are doing to compensate for that imbalance. Fifield said about Hunt,
for ours, we embrace the imbalance. And, balance is tricky. It's not to disparage the chess world, and I love chess and that stuff, but when you watch an unbeatable player go on for decades is will anyone ever beat them is not a thing that's a whole bunch of people are flocking to sign up and try, versus the amazing story of, the lowly mid 3-star who with an axe caught a 6-star napping somewhere, or, third partied him after the 6-star killed 5 other people, but you're the one who took him down with the axe at the end, is an amazing story and amazing feeling.
And that's interesting to me because I think YouTube channels, and I'm guilty of this too sometimes, do this thing where we just throw out the word meta constantly. And I feel like everyone's impression of the word meta doesn't actually account for the intentional asymmetric design as we see in games like Hunt Showdown, where there are powerful weapons like the Nitro and the Avto, but those are considerably more expensive and therefore higher risk than something like the Winfield C. Not to say things can't be tweaked and balanced, but it's just nice to hear the acknowledgement of the consideration. There is more at play here than just weapon stats on paper, and Fifield goes a bit further on balance, saying this.
I think the extra dimension we carry is that we do have the persistent hunter, we have the permadeath, and we have the economy that lives outside the match. So we have that sense of I don't have to balance the axe against the Avtomat. I have one cost $500 and one cost over 1,000. So that's an option that we have there. Plus it adds to those stakes that the player decides, am I going in high stakes or am I going in low stakes?
In my opinion, the economy is one of the sore spots of Hunt Showdown. Yes, certain weapons are more expensive, and yes, there is a Hunt dollar economy at play, but the players that have stuck around and opted out of the voluntary prestige system can rack up some serious cash, which incrementally reduces how effective a weapon's value can play on game balance. And some games' approach to these economic hiccups that slowly get out of hand are seasonal wipes like in Tarkov, or previously in the Cycle, or even recently Marauders, where everyone's gear and wallet was wiped out. All the developers shared their thoughts on wipes, and this was one of my favorite sections of the talk because there was so much differing opinion at the table on if wipes are a positive or negative, if they are a fresh starting point, or a cumbersome reason to regrind through all the stuff. And whether voluntary systems like Hunt's Prestige or forced resets like Tarkov, this option in the developer toolkit highlights a question of fairness and time to play the game.
I think that's a different dimension of fair, and actually how people can engage is like, how much disposable time do you have to put in games?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, value my time more than my money, or when I go to do this, and it's the don't have 700 hours to put into hunt, or those things. So it's like you're not getting bored with a season. Like you're not like, can't wait for the wipe, this is boring. You're like, well, I put in about 40 hours over the month, which is, a respectable part-time job. And it's like, but I'm like, but I'm so close I'm so far from being done, and now you're wiping. It's like, I still had 60 hours to go to get all the content I thought maybe I wanted, and you're wiping already. And that's just, to try and put the 40-hour player and the 400-hour player in the room together is, you just want very different things out of a game.
Yeah, that's why I quite like the voluntary prestiging.
Yeah.
Because someone who wants to repeat, I've done all this, I've done it all, but as you say, I bet I could do it quicker next time.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't bother with this, and I'd do that instead.
And the cool kids have done it 100 times. That's that's.
So that's one of the challenges of system wipes and prestige, is balancing the wants of different player groups and how there really isn't a one-size-fits-all system. I think a good example of this is the Battle Pass system, which is still pretty new to Hunt Showdown, but they did talk about Battle Passes briefly in this talk. Specifically for Hunt though, players who have more time can grind through the Battle Pass, but players that have less time can optionally buy boosters or levels to progress through the pass faster. That is one attempt at balancing the needs of the 40-hour player versus the 400-hour player. Obviously, you can't fairly do the same system to a prestige, but listening to them weigh the options, measure the pros and cons, I think you get some idea of the difficulty of making these decisions. Anyway, I just thought that was a cool section, but let's talk about guns, because I think that's a big topic within the Hunt community. We always want to know what is coming next in Hunt, and we got a little more clarity on the design philosophy there.
And of course, for Hunt, we have the great line of like, did it exist in 1895?
Yeah.
If it didn't, was it at least a prototype? And finding your line of what can you squint and see, and for us, it's about where we have a line of being authentic with a twist, but not going to steampunk, not going to, sci-fi or super out there, but just feeling like, no, this game, we always get the whole Royal Armory thing of like, our guns are based on real guns, and we love what they tell us. And if they show us we did something wrong, we're open to changing how we animate or even build the model. So
I've seen a lot of people recommend some pretty fantastical weapons. And sure, you might question how you rectify something like the Stalker Beetle with this mantra of authentic with a twist, but I think the main takeaway is the weapons are and will remain grounded in reality with some room for creativity. Think like the bomb lance. I feel like I've been talking about different weapon prototypes from the time period for years, and it seems that Crytek understands the rich vein of content that those weapons are. But of course, sometimes development has been slow. There can always be new additions as the game allows, but sometimes I see players scratching their head as to what exactly Crytek is even working on, which brings us to the technical debt section.
You expect to like Apex, there was no plan for Apex to beyond just its first few months. And so now we have all this technical debt that we have to pay down. And we're going to do it, but we would have made a lot different decisions if we knew. Right, yeah.
I'm in that right now. Like, we just announced that we're going from 5.6 CryEngine to 5.11.
Yeah.
It was 4 years ago that we had branched, and now we're going to reintegrate. And it's like, we've known we were going to do this.
But yeah.
Recently, I did a video on that announcement that Crytek was upgrading CryEngine from 5.6 to 5.11. And the reasons for that seem pretty clear. The current iteration of CryEngine appears to be making development more difficult or preventing highly requested features like FSR 2.1, HDR, etc., etc. So I guess like other games, there are other design considerations that have to be balanced by the technical requirements of the engine. And as games evolve, which is more common with the live service model, the more this technical debt begins to play into the decision-making process. So we're 5 years in, and you can imagine there's a lot of debt that has built up. And while bugs and performance are a huge contributor to people putting a game down, there are other considerations too that we've seen some glimpses of. This next section made the rounds with the games journalists when Fifield said this.
And I think there's like the proto version of it is in the racing games, the drivatars. Like this will race like your friend races, or you're racing against their version. And that's I've been at plenty of shooter companies where we're like, what if you could make a bot that played like me?
A lot of information.
Yeah, exactly. That's way more complicated than how you take a turn in a 2-dimensional track.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when the data's
But when you
it's
do
based
it,
off the data of somebody else driving it.
you know, when you do it, it's that, you know, there's that thrill of overcoming it. And like I said, I think there's a powerful onboarding tool. You know, one of the things we talk about that's, you know, that brick of getting in. Like we have an achievement in Hunt called Debut. It's kill your first enemy hunter. 40% of our players never get it. Like, so we're a PvP game where you come in, you do some things, and 40% of the people trying Hunt have never killed another player. And so we're working on it. Challenge accepted for us to make that better. But that's also, again, part of the charm or challenge, as you will. But being able to put more experiences in where that number goes down and more people get to play at least some part of the fun part or some part of, you know, find that mastery before they churn out having never got that achievement.
And I don't think that's too surprising. We've seen the introduction of an improved tutorial, and even heard that Crytek wants the onboarding to be better, keep new players interested longer, and not get churned out before they really grasp what Hunt Showdown is. Fifield doesn't explicitly say that they're adding AI enemy hunters, but it sounds pretty close, or at least the idea of introducing more systems where players get to the fun action sooner. That could be in the form of a firing range or private PvP modes, which we heard about in the developer roadmap. That could take the form of AI enemies in the new player lobbies, or maybe even a new mode entirely. The point is that there are clearly a lot of things in development, and nothing is off the table for consideration. If that sounds like assimilation or like watering down a former glory day from Hunt's past, then I think this clip highlights the commitment to keep Hunt Showdown distinct from its competition.
I think mine is just distinction, and it's not just FPSs, it's all games. I think trying to do more things that are distinct, that bring value, you know, the things that deserve to stand out, that, you know, don't just become a sea of sameness. And that's what I think we should look towards. Don't try to be the thing you aren't to, you know, go get the other game. Like a lot of times people are like, oh, well, that game's got this, we should have it too. And it's like, well, but if I did that, I'd just be a bad version of that game, and they might as well go play that game. And so be distinct, embrace your distinction. That's my encouragement for anyone trying to make games or find one to play and love.
So hopefully you found this as insightful as I did. We often think of games and game development as black and white. Is a gun meta, yes or no? Is a feature good or bad? And this roundtable drove the point home, at least for me, that there are a lot of things under constant consideration, not only in terms of player enjoyment, but by technical requirement too. And if you chart this conversation, you can almost see a map of the tools and options Hunt has ahead of it as it readies itself for a new commitment to content, more years of support, and more periods of growth. And just as a reminder, please check out that full article and talk in the pinned comment. But I want to end this video with something that Alan Wilson said that has stuck with me, so here it is.
That for me is as interesting as anything else. Is a game that'll catch my attention up front. And then what's the developer going to do with that over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Because that in itself is a big driver to me, is to come back and go, oh, they've done this. Oh, look where they're going now. It's just as the thing evolves. That's one of the things that gets me going back to games, is as people have evolved their own games and done fun new things with it.